In the vaults beneath Terra, the silence is not peace, it is omission. Not even the High Lords dare breathe of what lingers beyond their sight, for this truth stains even the memory of the throne. Above, the echo of a billion prayers drowns the stars, but in this sanctum, absence reigns. A void cultivated by one bloodline whose shadow precedes the Imperium itself. Their name does not appear in any archive, their lineage bleached from every recorded age, wiped by decree and dust alike. Yet the consequences of their existence bleed through the fabric of fate. Empires rise and fall in great wars, and the void swallows the names of heroes and traitors. But in the hidden sanctum, a despair deeper than any void, one question persists among those rare few who stumble upon hints in forbidden codices. Who truly controls destiny when even the High Lords serve as marionettes? Let the candles burn low. The vault doors, which no Mechanicus code may open, rust with secrets. Bone and circuit, blood and faith, every piece arranged for a game the galaxy never chose. The decaying edifice of power trembles, not from rebellion, but from the ancient web spun by this family. This is no mere house. It is a dynasty woven into the very definition of corruption and fate. In the ritual-choked history of Warhammer 40K, when Mechanicus priests trace the origins of their forbidden tech, when Inquisition agents whisper of orders unknown, one line stretches on, immune to extinction and disgrace. Across centuries, their members haunt court and battlefield alike, always a step ahead, their loyalty eclipsed only by ambition. They erase rivals not with blade but decree, not with fire but silence. Even the gods, lost and damned, are not immune to this dynasty's cold attention. Here, beneath the Imperium's grand machinery, prophecy and crime become indistinguishable. Power is a shadow, not an inheritance. And as the prayers echo above, shouted, desperate, the shadows below gather in silence, shaping destiny with hands unseen. The High Lords kneel, but not to whom you think. The silent sanctum answers to a blood unknown, its legacy sealed by celestial omission. Within the vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus, concealed from the gaze of history, the true Warhammer 40K inheritance festers.
They say every empire has a beginning, but this blood is older than empires, carved from myth and whispered through the void long before the God-Emperor claimed Terra. Beneath the surface of official chronicles, shrouded in ritual and contradiction, the genesis of the dynasty hides in sacrificial shadows, a birth unacknowledged, a name never spoken. It started not in palaces or under banners, but in exile. Generations before the dawn of the Imperium, when old Earth was still ravaged by techno-barbarian clans, a pact was made in silence. In the stone sanctum below the proto-cities, a line of visionaries, neither high priest nor warlord, cast aside blood feuds in favor of fate's design. Rooted in forbidden science and heretical faith, they gathered relics forbidden to all but the most desperate. Shattered archaeotech, the scroll fragments of lost gods. Keys to sanctums whose doors no one recalled building. They traced the rise and fall of civilizations with a scholar's obsession and a warlord's cunning. Mapping fractures in the soul of humanity, seeking conduits the High Lords would later fear to name. Across centuries, their rituals deepened, veiled ceremonies performed under the pall of solar storms, invoking not forgiveness, but endurance. The family's matriarch, known only in cipher as the Mother of Ashes, ordered the first sanctum built miles beneath the Earth's crust. In the darkness, her followers fused legend with logic, etching knowledge onto plates of bone with hexagrammic wards. The tale of their coming is not a birthright, it is a burden carried in silence, handed down from child to child, face to face, without record. Each generation is chosen not by blood alone, but by a test of spirit in the void. Those who falter perish quietly, their names erased. As the Terra fell and rose again, this dynasty infiltrated the courts of warlords and vision-maddened priests. The Emperor's silent ascension, the Unification Wars, the burning of Old Night touched them only peripherally. Never seeking open rule, they preferred the void, whispering in the forgotten passages of history. They guided exiled scholars, sabotaged marauding clans, sowed myth and doubt on both sides of every conflict. Their bloodline became an echo, untraceable but omnipresent. When the emperor declared war on ignorance, their sanctum sealed itself, choosing to survive behind layers of deception rather than contest the coming order head-on. In secret, the dynasty cultivated forbidden technology. Deep in the sanctum, gene forges blended ancient DNA with harvested relics of proto-humanity, creating scions who could resist psychic interrogation, nullify corrupting influence, and slip through fate's gaze unseen. Some say the early navigators drew upon this blood, borrowing its depths to travel the void. Others claim the line brokered alliances between Proto-Adeptus Mechanicus and exile sects, shaping the forbidden core of technological dogma the Imperium would spend millennia enforcing. Their instruments were subtle. Erased memories, manufactured paradoxes, networks of spies loyal to nothing but the blood. They made no moves for throne or banner, preferring to collect debts owed to those who believed themselves free. A turning point arrived in the Age of Strife. As Terra trembled in madness and warp storms raged, the dynasty vanished from all visible halls, taking only their most faithful. Rumors tell of a sorrowful choosing in the sanctum. Families divided, children winnowed for strength, the weak absorbed into the void. They turned loss into power, a ritual of prophecy, binding themselves to the fate of the stars but relinquishing all claim to the surface. In the deepest vault, beneath the death of hope, the Mother of Ashes divided the dynasty's essence. One path would serve in shadow, the other in light, both forever veiled from history itself. The first scion to walk in the open was known only as the Archivist. Disguised as a wandering preacher, he sowed despair among the survivors and hope among the desperate. He collected fragments of lore, bartered forbidden knowledge for loyalty and silence. When the first High Lords gathered atop Terra, the dynasty's representatives stood outside the walls, watching, not with envy, but with a scholar's patience. He whispered of lost technologies and the dangers of divine ambition, and those who listened lived longer than their rivals. For centuries, this pattern held. In every generation, a chosen few surfaced, always veiled, always nameless, always observing more than engaging. They manipulated perceptions, feeding truths and lies with equal skill. Their sanctum beneath Terra became a labyrinth of paradox. Inside, scholars argued the nature of fate and debated whether even the Emperor's will could truly shape the stars. Outside, history unfolded as if by accident, yet always with echoes of their hidden hand. The dynasty's power remained mythic, echoing beyond reach, yet present in every rumor of corruption, every tale of fate denied. In time, the bloodline branched, infiltrating orders sworn against heresy, embedding agents within proto-Inquisition cells, bargaining with the earliest rogue traitor clans. Before the Imperium ever formalized its order, this family had already mapped its darkest corridors. In the void beyond the sanctum, their scions drifted between worlds, bearing relics wrapped in prophecy, pieces of lost gods and half-remembered empires. They offered what must remain forbidden: secret cures, ancient weapons, cryptic maps. And always they bound subjects with paradox, never full loyalty, a debt owed to the blood and the future both. Their heritage fused with cosmic awe and existential dread. For every act of mercy, another of corruption followed. Every revelation concealed a warning. Even gods feared the silence between worlds, or so the dynasty taught, in lessons carved on living memory. They seduced enemies with promises, only to erase every trace before history could record their involvement. Fate itself bent, twisted by their machinations, and in this twisting, the true shape of the Warhammer 40K empire emerged, not as a monolith, but as a labyrinth whose exit was never meant to be found. As the Great Crusade began, legend whispered of the dynasty's final test. Those who survived endured not because they were chosen, but because they understood the curse of power. Their legacy, etched in ash and bone, became the blueprint for every future calamity. Inquisition purges, Mechanicus schisms, fallen angels hunting redemption. Through it all, one truth persisted. The dynasty did not bow to the High Lords, nor any mere emperor. They served only the sanctum, only the void. Their methods invisible, but relentless. So, the origin of the dynasty remains a paradox, born in exile, ascendant in concealment, eternal in corruption. It is a blood that stains without color, a root that flowers only beneath dying stars. When you study the rise of power in Warhammer 40K, know that the architects of fate measure victory not in wars won or thrones claimed, but in the silence preserved beneath holy fire. Every dynasty begins with conquest, but this one was born in the absence of mercy. Their greatest weapon is the silence between truth and myth. In the shadow of the age of strife, ancient civilizations crumbled as one. One bloodline harvested their secrets, shaping the destiny of Warhammer 40K in the void. Before the High Lords, before the throne, a legacy walked unseen.
Above Terra's sanctified crust, the wars of succession thundered. Armies clashing, banners burning, empires blossoming and dying in the twilight of ambition. Yet below, in the echoing sanctum, the dynasty's rise unfolded as no warlord would dare witness. Their power did not declare itself in battle, nor toxify itself in spectacle. It rose as the veil thickened, as history forgot to ask questions, as trust soured into unbreakable debt. When the Imperium forged its might across the stars, every newly minted High Lord, every ruthless cardinal, every venerated archmagos saw themselves at the center. Few sensed the drift of shadows behind the throne, the silent elevation of a house unnamed, its corridors built not for grandeur, but for surveillance. The dynasty's ascent was patient, a scholar's expansion, a priest's ritual, but a monster's appetite. The first true movement began in the aftermath of the emperor's conquest. Power coalesced, order hardening around the thunder of doctrine. Palaces rose, secrets compounded. In the depths, the dynasty's agents crafted a counter-history, transcribing atrocities and miracles alike with ink distilled from forgetful minds. Their spies rippled through the ecclesiarchy, the early Astra Militarum, leaving impressions, not traces. Every new institution reflected their handiwork, a hidden geometria of paranoia, incentive, and moral ambiguity. When the Council of Terra convened, seeking to codify rule, the family remained spectrally present in every debate. Anonymous advisors stirred dissent with innocent questions. Operations were sabotaged for the good of the many or the protection of one. Rivals gathered to sense the shape of power, yet never found the hidden architect. The dynasty moved by subtraction, erasing evidence, nullifying threats, reassigning key actors into exile or sudden promotion. Their court was not in marble halls, but within the infernal silence between decisions, always indirect, always decisive. It was said on the tongues of survivors, "In times of fate, look for the hand that does not reveal itself until your memory betrays you." It was not a proverb, but a warning written in the ash that settled after every crisis. The dynasty's members walked the halls disguised as scribes, janitors, minor preachers. Their discipline was absolute, punishment for breaking silence administered in rituals colder than the void. Generation by generation, they perfected anonymity until their own progeny no longer knew the fullness of the legacy. Truth became a riddle whose answer was always farther in the dark.
Loyalty was never given, only earned through despair and tested with loss. Under the dynasty's shadow, the Adeptus Mechanicus found itself guided into paradox. In the first century of Union, technology was neither worshipped nor denied, but weaponized at the edge of rebellion. Ancient codes from the sanctum were delivered in time to preserve hope, yet adjusted to ensure perpetual dependency. If a lord sought ultimate power, the dynasty ensured he acquired it only at cost of unpayable debt. So pride became vulnerability, faith became tool, and every innovation bloomed with hidden decay. The dynasty's ascent was not simply structural, it was metaphysical. Prophecy became their language. Each scion was a vessel for hidden lore, receiving memories as visions, nightmares, and fevered whispers. In the deep sanctum, the Mother of Ashes, now a legend herself, devised an order. Every secret must come with a consequence, every boon with a curse. The dynasty held the power to transform fate, but always measured its gift with entropy. Even as stars were blinded by imperial expansion, the dynasty tidied the edges of deterioration, ensuring that no utopia could live long enough to threaten the sanctum's primacy. As the Great Crusade spread, the family intervened in ways historians still misattribute to chance. Rogue traders received charts that led not to riches, but to moral collapse. Space Marine chapters welcomed untraceable advisors whose counsel led to Pyrrhic victory. In mysterious moments, entire archives vanished or were rewritten overnight, their records bent by the weight of a single sealed vault somewhere beneath Terra. The dynasty did not need to kill to win. They let time, debt, and loneliness do the work. Then came the Great Schism, the moment when the dynasty nearly revealed itself. A conflict between light and shadow, a scion defected, seeking open mastery in the halls above. For a heartbeat of history, the bloodline threatened to fracture. Yet in the silence that followed, the sanctum prevailed. The defector recollected, erased, returned as if memory itself had been reforged. The family's collective will resisted drama, preferring correction over spectacle. Their influence reached outwards, encouraging certain sects of navigators to bind themselves in the ninth oath of silence, seeding the earliest whispers of heresy within the Mechanicus, bargaining with forbidden beings in the warp, not out of madness, but to ensure secrets remained unspoken. Legends told that only those who survived the dynasty's tests learned the true shape of fate, understanding that power is not to be held, but managed, that corruption is the price of prophecy, and that order is forged in the intersection of loss and deception. Within the sanctum, new rituals solidified the family's control. The scions composed songs of tragedy to test their memories, practiced devotion to the void rather than to gods. They cataloged every loss in bone and ink, preparing for futures that would never materialize. In these moments, the dynasty's ascent reached its zenith, not the height of public adulation, but mastery of the silent weave running through every fracture of empire. No one saw them rule, but everyone felt their legacy in the space between cause and consequence. The family accepted the burden of tragedy as the cost of stewardship, blessing and cursing every conflict with invisible hands. The true ascent of power lived not in a coronation, but in the silence after applause, the knowledge that the world changes only as the dynasty permits. And so they endured, their names still erased, their blood still unspoken, their sanctum untouched by all catastrophe. The high lords ascended, the empire burned and rebuilt, but beneath it the architects waited, shaping the echoes of all things. Where laws fail, the shadows succeed. In the silent sanctum, power does not speak, it whispers until it is law. Within the hallowed chambers of Terra's council, the fate of Warhammer 40K's empire was drafted not only by high lords, but by hands veiled in ritual and prophecy. Powerless applause dies in grand halls. The echoes remain, bearing the dynasty's secret ascent. Whisper, what you see is only the surface. True empire lies beneath.
It began not with thunder, but with the slow erosion of memory. When the dynasty's secrets bled into the halls above, corruption was not a moment, it was a process, a dimming of purpose infected by ambition. The sanctum, carved in silence and ritual, found itself shadowed by its own echoes, as scions tested the depth of power on scales the Mother of Ashes never intended. The first fracture crept as ambition outweighed devotion. A young archivist, groomed in the labyrinth of paradox, gazed too long at the throne above and desired its cold illumination. His betrayal was not dramatic, no blade in the dark, no declaration before council. Instead, he failed in silence, revealing a fragment of sanctum lore to a high lord desperate for salvation. In the moment, disaster seemed averted, a crisis passed, a debt settled. Yet the seed of rot had been planted. The knowledge offered did not heal, but twisted, unmaking virtue, seasoning every future with suspicion and hunger. As the dynasty folded into itself, internal schisms multiplied. Ritual discipline weakened beneath the burden of silent suffering. Scions, once bred for the void, began to sacrifice subtlety for control, tracing the bloodline not in hidden oaths, but in open alliances. For the first time, the family's influence became a rumor in the halls of Terra. Scholars guessed the shape of invisible architects. Soldiers whispered of fortunes won and lost beyond comprehension. The sanctum became less a place of unity, more a chamber of echoes, where prophecy battled self-interest. The Mechanicus, emboldened by sanctioned heresy, unearthed relics none should touch. The dynasty, once so careful, enabled their quest in a moment of strategic arrogance, for it seemed then that mastery of forbidden creation might cement their primacy forever. What followed was agony. Machines sang the dirges of lost gods, echoing the corruption of primordial technology. Elders of the bloodline succumbed to hubris, forgetting the void's lesson. Every gift without consequence breeds ruin. In the surface empire, the dynasty's fall was still invisible, manifesting instead as a surge of calamities. Betrayals erupted in the council, alliances shattered without warning, loyalties reversed through threats made in silence. Scions manipulated powers they no longer understood, trading away pieces of fate for temporary victories. The void began to reclaim its own. Whispers of madness visited the sanctum, visions of doom haunting the children gnawed by prophecy. Even as High Lords sat complacent, the dynasty cracked. The light within their vaults dimmed with every legend lost. Among the family, bitterness took root. Some scions bartered with forbidden beings, xenos and warped intelligences, making bargains doctrine forbade. A cleric, corrupted by grief, tore the sanctum's ritual wards, hoping to commune directly with the lost gods of ancient civilizations. What he summoned was not wisdom, but entropy, a mirror of the dynasty's impending collapse. Shadows flickered across the faces of the faithful, secrets that once sustained now poisoned. Blood was spilled in silence, names vanished from bone plates, removed for weakness or betrayal, replaced by silence more chilling than death. Wars erupted between scion and scion, silent and unseen. No army marched, no trumpet sounded. Instead, wars of memory and meaning unfolded, pacts broken, debts defaulted. The sanctum's archives became battlegrounds, prophecies rewritten, histories purged of uncomfortable truths. One archivist engineered a ritual of despair, trapping all rivals in a cycle of suspicion. The cost was unimaginable, entire generations consumed by paranoia, each testing faith against the corrupt hope of dominance.
In this age, the dynasty's influence lost its subtlety. Advisors once hidden grew bold, risking direct intervention in imperial affairs. Their success was brief, but with every overt act, their enemies multiplied. Rogue traitors, once beholden to sanctum secrets, defected for greater promises. The Mechanicus, sensing weakness, claimed forbidden relics as trophies rather than tools. Inquisitors began searching for the architects of fate, piecing together myths into condemnation. Conspiracies abounded, but none knew the full truth. Only the dynasty felt the agony of its unraveling in every echo of lost prophecy. Then, as loss became tradition, a second betrayal struck. The eldest scion, tortured by failure, betrayed not the Imperium, but the sanctum itself, sacrificing the last untainted relic to a machine cult desperate for ascension. This act shattered the sanctum's soul. Rituals lost meaning, prophecies fractured. The deepest archive, the memory at the creation of the Bloodline, was erased in grief. Even the Mother of Ashes faded, her final decree that only loss preserves power swallowed by the void. Despair became doctrine. The sanctum, stripped of unity, devolved into isolated chambers. Each scion, now haunted by corruption, wandered the empire seeking penance or oblivion. The High Lords noticed chaos but never understood its source, poisoning one another with ambition while the architect's legacy collapsed below. Fate shook, empires convulsed as hidden hands faltered. In their agony, the dynasty's children attempted renewal, some seeking rebirth in exile, others bartering away memory for the illusion of peace. A final ritual, desperate and flawed, attempted to restore order. The price was ruin. The echoes of the family's greatness lost, replaced only by entropy. The sanctum's silence, once a vessel of power, became a tomb. Yet even as corruption hollowed out their legacy, whispers persisted. In every crisis, in every act of betrayal, the rumor of a hidden family continued, now as a warning, now as a curse. The dynasty, corrupted and fallen, cast a new shadow, not a promise of hope, but a legend of caution. The void claimed its tribute, and the only comfort left was the knowledge that ruin is the mirror of ambition. The architect's lesson remained, written in cosmic regret, echoing into eternity. Heed what was sacrificed, for in the halls where even gods fear to tread, corruption is the cost of vision unrestrained. Every legacy bleeds. When ambition exceeds ritual, even the sacred become monsters, forgotten by oath, erased in silence. When forbidden creation corrupted the sanctum, the fall of a dynasty inscribed new myth in the heart of Warhammer 40K's endless empire. Ritual fires dying in the vault, thunder muted by stone. Whisper, corruption is the inheritance all power bequeaths.
The vault's silence is absolute, measured in centuries and regrets. Here, at the nadir of fate, the true shape of the dynasty reveals itself, not as lineage, but as a paradox, shrouded within the failure of memory and the fracture of myth. No chronicler dares to articulate their legacy. No High Lord's pen can reach the core where revelation meets entropy. For this is the lesson that lurks beneath every echo. Power corrupts, but only truth destroys. Among the holy relics and cursed tablets strewn across the sanctum, the surviving scions gather to map the contours of loss. Their faces are masked in ash, their eyes hollow with visions. They speak not of glory or ruin, but of the hidden truth that reframes every tale. What the world believed to be a fall was, in fact, the opening of the final chamber, a cosmic purging, the dynasty's attempt to become legend and warning at once. The chosen archivist returns, this time not veiled but scorched by all he has endured. He walks the endless spiral of the sanctum, collecting remnants, listening to the faint prayers of ancestors echoing through double walls. Above,
Empires clamor for answers, but below, in the dust and void, the bloodline pivots. They know now, influence is a mask worn briefly before the void compels another shape. Century by century, their revelations accrue. The dynasty was not merely born to rule, but to obscure, not to shape fate, but to train those who crave power in the language of suffering. Each secret granted comes freighted with paradox. The family did not mastermind history, it multiplied ambiguity, ensuring that no victory could taste pure, no ruin occur without a subtle lesson engraved in bone. Lost gods, the fragments unearthed by Mechanicus zealots and exiled magi, hold only partial answers. The dynasty's true weapon was memory's architecture, not relic's destruction. They whispered to navigators, initiates, and rogues, embedding questions within answers. What is power if not the measure of what you're willing to lose? The curse that devastated their sanctum served to winnow not the weak, but those unable to dream beyond conquest. Long before the emperor's hands sealed the fate of worlds, the dynasty's agents learned to trade one disaster for another. They sowed spiritual drought among the ecclesiarchy, ensured that every golden doctrine bore a hidden flaw. Their whispers became prophecy, the voice one hears in solitude, the question behind every triumph. Is this victory, or is it the end of something worth mourning? Legends of Norse gods bound in fetters, of sci-fi empires consumed by the machine, bleed together in the sanctum's record. Each parable warns not of the dangers of fate, but of the dangers in believing one's story untouched by the void. Beneath the sanctum, the scions debate the ethics of revelation. They examine failed rituals, broken alliances, and the moments of intoxication where power seduced betrayal. It is said, a bloodline survives as long as it is unknown. But here, hidden in the final echo, they confess to one another that even anonymity is a kind of curse, a shield, but also a tombstone. In the deepest archive, the ghost of the Mother of Ashes remains, not as matriarch, but as warning incarnate. She whispers to every descendant, let your errors become prophecy, let your ruin inform another's myth. Across the empire, those who survived the dynasty's subtle hand begin to notice the pattern. High Lords wake in dread. Their memories replay decisions they did not make, alliances they do not recall forging. Mechanicus saints look to the stars, searching for answers in the void, only to find that the void now stares back. The power behind history does not reside in archives, but in the fear that every echo holds a lesson waiting to be confessed. Inquisitors hunting for the dynasty's origin find only further riddles, a trail of erased records, corrupted artifacts, and bone plates inscribed with poetry so tragic it could only be confession. The archivist delivers final warnings to enemies and allies alike, shaping the aftermath not by deed, but by omission. Fate buckles, the meaning of power reverses. The dynasty is not destroyed, but translated, recast as myth so potent that to believe it is to fear what else might be true. Cosmic dread overtakes the sanctum. Even those who remain cannot comfort themselves with the old certainties. They gather for the last ritual, a ceremony not of rebirth, but of acknowledgement. Let us be legend, they intone. Let the story of our blood caution all who read. In this moment, the family's final gift is revelation. History bends not to power, but to the meaning granted by the survivors. Their legacy is no longer the silent manipulation of empires, but the transmission of paradox through myth. Traitors become martyrs, failures become prophecy, corruption becomes the dialect through which legend is learned. Every survivor, every echo leaves behind a warning etched in the void. Beware seeking control that answers only to silence. In the final archive, the Mother of Ashes carves one last line. There is no innocence in creation, only the cost of what was lost. The hidden truth is complete. It does not free those who know it, but it arms them, all who hear this legend, with the courage to face the darkness in their own blood. Every myth conceals a warning. The dynasty's greatest power was not manipulation, but the courage to reveal what must never be untouched. Along the bone vaults of forbidden Terra, the true architects of Warhammer 40,000's science and myth became legend through the loss they chose, not the secrets they kept. Dust drifting through hollow sanctums. Whisper, power is the lesson that lingers when all records are gone. Silence and echo, the reveal that forever reframes the darkness.
In the bleak stillness after revelation and ruin, the sanctum lies in ruin, its once resonant corridors choked by cold dust and the silent witnesses of all that was lost. Shadows sprawl across broken tablets and shattered archives, a silence measured in centuries, not minutes. The vault's doors, once coded in logic and prophecy, creak on their hinges. The dynasty that once engineered destiny itself is now an echo, its name dissolved into the endless void. But in this silence, the true aftermath of their existence begins, an inheritance of doubt, caution, and the lingering, unanswerable question: what becomes of power when the architects are gone? On Terra, the gleam of the High Lord's chambers betrays unease. Advisors whisper in latticework corridors, wary that their slightest misstep might awaken an old curse. Rumors weave through every level of the sprawling hive, from the lowest manufactorum slave to the armored clergyman of the ecclesiarchy. It is not the dynasty's presence that haunts the Imperium, but its sudden absence, the deep unspoken fear that the invisible hand, having withdrawn, leaves a world unbalanced. In dark moments, lords and cardinals catch their breath, feeling the emptiness like a knife pressed to ambition's throat. Across the stars, legends breed caution. On distant forge worlds, the Mechanicus unearth forgotten relics. Servitors crack open stasis-locked caskets, only to recoil from the paradox etched in the ancient circuitry. Each artifact hums with the memory of forbidden origin, a signal that mastery is never pure, that every technological leap is shadowed by a debt to hands unseen. Some magi mutter prayers blaming their chronic stasis on the curse of the lost dynasty, blaming every unexpected malfunction or inexplicable innovation on the inheritors of the sanctum's legacy. The Inquisition, always hungry for certainty, is left with threads that circle eternally. Agents pore over secret histories, tracking anomalies, implausible survival stories, vanished records, uncanny patterns of fate. Some press deeper than others, interrogating the roots of every paradox, but the clues dissolve into riddles. A lone interrogator assembles a mosaic of betrayals and assassinations, but each piece merely points to another absence, another erasure. In the end, the only certainty is the void itself, an intelligence that lives in omission, not in revelation. But in this silence, the true aftermath of their existence begins, an inheritance of doubt, caution, and the lingering, unanswerable question: what becomes of power when the architects are gone? But the dynasty's truest legacy is not in fear, nor even in the relics and caution it seeded across the centuries. Its mark survives within those who rise from the aftermath, survivors, inheritors, and orphans, scattered between stars and factions. Now in precious moments of doubt and hesitation, the philosophers and scholars who suspect the dynasty's story whisper what has become their silent prayer: all power must remember the price of prophecy.
All order is haunted by the secrets it must deny to survive. This is how the bloodline echoes, not as rulers or manipulators, but as the seed of humility in a universe famished for certainty. Yet the dynasty's influence does not die gently. Rogue traitors, possessing luck bordering on the uncanny, escape doom time after time. Unwitting inheritors of a gene coded for survival. A scatter of psychers and preachers in the depths of the underhive murmur forgotten prayers that carry the cadence of the sanctum's old rites, warning those who listen that disaster always lurks beneath victory. On frontier worlds, children are born with the look of ancient wisdom in their eyes, quiet, withdrawn, marked by the burden of truths they never learned but always somehow know. The Mechanicus, even in its zealous rigidity, cannot fully silence the memory of the dynasty's subtle heresies. In hidden litanies, tech priests confess to colleagues that the greatest discoveries are always gifts from the architects who vanished. An archmagos, dissecting an artifact that should not exist, pauses in awe as he perceives a familiar paradox. Technology that only works when misunderstood. Equations that collapse if spoken aloud. He realizes with dread-tinged wonder that this is the true inheritance, a technology that teaches humility, a legacy that demands reverence before the unknown. Meanwhile, the ecclesiarchy folds the dynasty's myth into its own labyrinth of doctrine. Breathing incense over ossuaries, high priests draw lessons from the architect's ruin. Every victory sows the next corruption. Each act of faith must be measured in echoing silence. Relics vanish from shrines, reappearing later with inexplicable additions. Epistles inscribed in a dialect only the most ancient scholars remember. References to bloodlines erased from imperial rolls. For some, this is merely superstition. For those who understand, it is the ever-tightening circle of fate. Out in the black gulfs between worlds, the warp itself hums the memory of the dynasty's sacrifice. Astropaths whisper of voices not their own, voices delivering warnings in paradox. The bloodline is not ended, only hidden. Beware the hole at the heart of prophecy. The echoes ripple through the warp storms, refracting through nightmares in visions, etching the architect's warning into the bedrock of galactic memory. The dynasty's greatest legacy is felt not by those who know its name, but by those who fear their mastery most. Lords hesitate on the brink of tyranny, doubting their purity of intent. Priests dwell longer on the price of dogma. Mechanicus adepts approach each innovation with awe and caution, intuitively sensing the consequences of overreach. The architect's shadow stretches beyond deeds or dominion. It lingers in the instinct to pause at the edge of the permissible, to feel the brush of cold prophecy before rushing into greatness. On the edge of Terra, among ruined vaults crusted in memory, the last archivist stares into the darkness of the sanctum, pen trembling above a fresh bone plate. He carves the closing testament. Let the architects be forgotten by name, but immortalized in regret. For every silence that follows ruin, a lesson blooms. That fate itself is shaped by hands unseen, and that the price of power is the memory carried by those who come after. As light fades, a single echo lingers, a warning more enduring than any monument. The architects were not destroyed. Their story is now the silent conscience of empire. In a universe built on ambition and denial, their ruin is the first and final act of wisdom. When all is ashes, it is silence that endures. The dynasty's legacy is not power, but the void that teaches every empire to honor what cannot be understood. In every vanished artifact and unexplainable fate across Warhammer 40K's eternal empire, the architects remind us, true legacy dwells not in domination, but in the humility demanded by the unknown. Sanctum bathed in dusk, chorus of echoes. Final whisper, you cannot outlast your own shadow. Echo trails into darkness, fate sealed by caution and memory.
There is a darkness deep and unbroken, older than thrones, older than blood. In the failed sanctum, where dust tangles with regret and every stone remembers secrets, the legend dies to become truth. Silence is not the absence of story, it is the last act of wisdom. When empires fade and dynasties fall, when all immortals are dethroned, the universe returns to its veil, a tapestry woven of warning, not triumph. The architects of fate, erased yet undying, drift through history's deepest well, measuring consequence against ambition. Their lessons ripple through the void, written in scars and remembered not with pride, but with wary reverence. Here, in the closing echo, lies the question pressed upon every survivor. What draws mortals, high lords and scholars, priests and conquerors, to chase power that devours its own bearers? What myth compels the hand to reach beyond memory, past humility, until only the ruins of ambition linger? In the hushed crypts of Terra, the final archivist stands alone, a solitary witness to both the grandeur and folly of legacy. His eyes track the falling dust, each mote a regret unspoken. Behind him are vaults of bone, prophecy, and secrets lost. Before him, the dusk of an age. He inscribes his testament with trembling clarity. Every destiny is bought at the price of what you cannot remember. We were architects not of order, but of paradox, teachers who built caution from ruin. And beyond the vault, in the larger world, the narrative resumes, not in neat conclusions, but in endless ripples. For every empire that rises, another falls. For every prophecy shouted as gospel, there is a hidden warning carved beneath. Powers that ruled for millennia decay not from the rebel's blade, but from the slow realization that every victory is haunted by the echo of loss. Faithful and heretic, rulers and outcasts, all share this inheritance, the shadow that teaches humility, the silence that demands reflection before action. Philosophers linger on the nature of fate itself. They ask, in sermons and in suffering, is history simply the accumulation of unchecked desires, or does the void serve, in its unyielding patience, as the crucible for every lesson worth remembering? In the Warhammer 40K empire, where myth and machine fuse, where Norse fatalism collides with the desperation of sci-fi survival, the answer is never simple. For every new calculation, every doctrine or technological wonder, the question persists. Did we earn this mastery, or did we merely inherit a debt written in the shadow of architects now gone? The survivors whisper, in secret corners and lonely cells, stories too heavy for any shrine. Children inherit both wisdom and curse. Leaders falter before making choices that reek of history's warning. In the sanctum's aftermath, to know the truth is not to be cleansed of guilt, but to accept the burden of restraint in times of plenty and caution in times of chaos. The echoes of lost gods, of broken empires and corrupted blood become more than tales. They serve as philosophical bridges between each age's doom and deliverance. The dynasty's warning endures as lore and as law, a ghostly breath in every negotiation, every prayer, every ambition for greatness. In the deepest hours, the voice of the sanctum returns, sometimes as wisdom, sometimes as agony, reminding all, legend is never a victory. It is the cost paid for surviving ruin. Cosmic awe blends with despair as the story concludes. Armies may gather, banners may be unfurled, but the shadow of caution cannot be banished. The Mother of Ashes, now myth herself, speaks to every mind that listens.
If you seek power, accept the cost. If you honor legacy, never forget its source. Her words are the final ritual, the moment when myth departs and the echo remains. Fated bloodlines endure not by strength, but by the wisdom to relinquish desire before the void swallows all. The greatest lesson the dynasty offers is not in domination or secrecy, but in the courage to confess. We survive most honestly by listening to the warning beneath every myth. In the darkness between worlds, between victories and collapses, empires persist only if they honor the silence, the deep, unyielding humility demanded by the architect's ruin. Those who inherit the universe must leave behind more than monuments. They must pass forward caution. Survival is not a badge of glory, but an inheritance of awareness, a quiet promise to resist the seduction of unchecked power. The architects were forgotten not because they failed, but because their warning became law and their ruin became legend. Final embers flicker in the sanctum as the archivist concludes his testament. The last bone plate carries no name, only a creed. Within the silence, remember your fate. Let no victory steal your caution. Let no ruin erase your humility. For every shadow cast, a legend lingers, and the echo, not the empire, endures. Legends do not promise triumph. They beg humility. If you listen carefully, every myth reveals more warning than victory. In the void between eternal empires, Warhammer 40K's oldest bloodline teaches, caution is cosmic law, and every survivor is shaped by legend's cost. If the echoes of this story stirred you, remember, every legend hides a warning. Subscribe and listen for the next one.